Coming up on Market to Market, what the research reveals 2 decades after the first GMO crop, and one community's harvest of dividends following a devastating tornado. Those stories and market analysis with Elaine Kub, next.
Wherever your operation takes you, or who you share it with, we'll be where we've been all along. With you from the word go. Proud sponsor of Market to Market.
Tomorrow. For over 100 years, we've worked to help our customers be ready for tomorrow. Trust in tomorrow. Information is available from a Grinnell Mutual agent today. This is the Friday, March 2 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Delaney Howell. President Trump hosted pro-ethanol forces this week who were attempting to break an impasse on biofuels. Neither side gave ground. The talks occurred just before the president announced an import tariff on steel and aluminum. The news pushed the Dow Jones Industrial Average lower as investors sent their money other places in the event of a trade war. Earlier in the week, the Commerce Department reported orders for durable goods dropped 3.7% as demand for big-ticket items like airplanes declined. Orders for durable goods fell just 0.3% when the big silver birds were taken out of the equation. Despite a potential backlash on U.S. grain exports from Trump's new tariff, farmers continue to make plans for the next season. Some of those selections will include genetically modified seeds. GMOs were introduced nearly a generation ago. Extensive testing in the years that followed has left the data trail several studies long. Peter Tubbs has the details.
In an analysis of scientific investigation stretching over 2 decades, researchers at 2 Italian universities compiled data on genetically modified corn, soybeans, canola, and cotton. This week, they released a report comparing yield, crop quality, target and non-target organisms, and biomass decomposition with non-GMO crops of the same type. The meta-analysis was based on 72 studies from 6 continents and over 11,000 field observations. The results produced distinct improvement in several categories. Between 1996 and 2016, yield was improved by 24.5%, while mycotoxin concentrations declined by 1/3. The crop with the largest potential benefit was GMO corn, which represents only 30% of the global corn crop. GMO crops that targeted insects reduced population and damage without affecting other organisms in the same environment. The study also found a consistent reduction in the application of herbicides and pesticides on GMO crops when compared to similar genomes. Currently, 38 countries, including 19 in Europe, prohibit the planting of GMO crops. For Market to Market, I'm Peter Tubbs.
A tornado rocked a southern Kansas town more than a decade ago, leaving residents with the tough decision of leaving or rebuilding. Those who stayed have faced an uphill financial battle exacerbated by controversial tax cut policies enacted by former Governor Sam Brownback. Undeterred, the hardy souls who remained have kept up the fight to restore their lives. Josh Bittner has our cover story.
To me, it was as much a feeling as a sound. I mean, yes, it was roaring and it was loud, but we really could feel the earth shake.
Nearly 11 years ago, Kim Gamble and her farm family sought refuge from an EF5 tornado that nearly wiped Greensburg, Kansas, off the map.
To see all your stuff blown all over in your house is one thing, but you go to town and you can't even find the house, so.
Her husband Kai's wheat crop took a beating that year, and even though volunteers helped scour fields adding up to the size of the small town itself, random debris is still entangled within thickets nearby.
For people who lost their home, lost their job, I think it was harder because their day was filled with just that sense of overwhelming, what do I do next? We knew, well, we got to go start the irrigation engine. So we had a little bit of that I think helped us move down the road Would you say that's probably right?
And when you looked out the window and you could see the trains go through town, and you could never see trains before, that was really weird.
For decades, Greensburg's claim to fame was the world's largest hand-dug well, completed in the 1800s. But the emphasis shifted in May 2007.
You've been watching this for quite a little while. What did you estimate its maximum width was?
I would say easily a mile, and that's kind of being conservative.
The nighttime twister tore a 29-mile path north through Comanche County up to Greensburg, the seat of Kiowa County, 100 miles west of Wichita.
We're right on the line. You're right.
205-mile-per-hour surface winds were reported in town. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, among the population of 1,600, 11 died and nearly 1,500 homes and businesses were either destroyed or sustained major or minor damage, a 95% loss. To many residents, the town and surrounding landscape were unrecognizable.
I almost got lost in this small town because there's no landmarks, nothing standing except the elevator.
Market to Market toured the devastation with Kai's father, Dean Gamble, less than 48 hours after the 2007 cyclone struck. While then-President George W. Bush declared Greensburg a disaster area eligible for federal aid, the retired teacher and farmer, now deceased, surveyed his decimated home.
It's a rude awakening. We thought we had our lives well intact and everything would be great. But now what? You just got to start all over again. It's hard to take.
We were making a lot of decisions early on in this emotional state of mind, that first 6 to 8 months after the tornado.
1 year into the aftermath, the town's well-respected postmaster, Bob Dixon, was prodded by community members to run for mayor and won. Since then, he's helped shepherd the town's vision toward an environmentally proactive rehab.
The concept of going green started the night after the tornado, when representatives from the governor's office, our local elected officials, FEMA was in town already. And the discussion started back, hey, you're going to have to rebuild the whole town. Let's make sure we do it in a right, prudent, and responsible manner.
Dixon says Greensburg City Council passed a resolution to erect all new municipal buildings to meet a LEED Platinum standard, a designation certified by the U.S. Green Building Council. Greensburg City Hall used 75,000 bricks claimed from the rubble in its new structure. Other buildings followed suit, employing things like natural light, effective use of shade, and solar panels. Wind turbines now dot the landscape as well, helping curb the town's carbon footprint, along with its electric bill. Energy-efficient solutions have been encouraged across the community. The local hospital and John Deere dealership played along, as did the school system. But for some, the upfront costs were daunting. City officials grant that rebuilding green averaged around 12% above standard costs, but point to a study by the National Renewable Energy Lab, a division of the U.S. Department of Energy, which calculated up to a 40% subsequent increase in performance.
All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed?
The mayor admits a progressive push in an area traditionally skeptical of overarching change has led to bumps in the road forward.
We have to remember that here in the agriculture community and throughout the Midwest and the High Plains, we're very independent people. So rules and regulations sometimes are misinterpreted as an infringement on our freedoms and our rights. And sometimes they are. And sometimes we use that as an excuse.
Greensburg's population is still well below what it was before the tornado. For elderly citizens, rebuilding wasn't really their cup of tea. But there are hints of a younger generation putting down roots. So after $75 million in insurance payments, nonprofit funds, and government assistance have helped the town rise from the ashes, some say local investors are key to Greensburg's longevity.
After you get a community wiped out and lose friends and family, it changes your whole perspective on life.
The Gambles and other local producers have sunk over $1 million into the town's business incubator area, which helps local entrepreneurs keep a lid on costs as they get their operations off the ground. And along with other investments in the community, farmers turned benefactors have showcased the resilience of a town that could have become nothing more than a memory.
There's people that can and do, and there's people that can but don't. And we're very fortunate that the people that can, we have a whole lot of people that do in this community to make it better, to address quality of life issues.
For Market to Market, I'm Josh Bittner.
Next, the Market to Market report.
Weather in South America captured more attention from commodity traders than the threat of a trade war. For the week, May wheat jumped 36 cents, while the nearby corn contract moved 11 cents higher. Continued hot and dry conditions in Argentina combined with rain in Brazil to push the May soybean contract 24 cents higher. The price has risen nearly $1 since February 5th. May meal climbed $14.60 per ton. May cotton added 75 cents per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, April Class 3 milk futures gained 18 cents. The livestock sector remained mixed as the April live cattle contract shed $2.67. Nearby feeders lost $3.22, and the April lean hog contract gained $3.20. The U.S. dollar index bumped up 15 points. April crude oil was able to stay above $60, even with a $2.30 loss per barrel, and COMEX gold fell $6.90 per ounce. The Goldman Commodity Sachs Index faded nearly 11 points to close at 441.40. Here now to lend us her insight on these and other trends is one of our regular market analysts, Elaine Kub. In case you want to go over things again, you can download or listen to our market analysis and Market Plus podcasts online anytime at iptv.org/MTOM. Elaine Kub, welcome back.
It is a delight to be across this table from you, Delaney.
I'm very excited, Elaine. I'm glad to have you here. We talked a little bit before the program today about this recent news with President's imposement of tariffs on aluminum and steel. What does that mean for the commodity markets?
Listen, we already have a case study of how China, for instance, will respond to this kind of movement. In the weekly export sales report this week, we saw absolutely zero export sales for milo or grain sorghum. And the only shipment destination is China for there. And when they don't want it, that's really hurtful to that particular market. It used to be the case for a few years there that milo was trading at a premium to corn, and now that has gone away. And that, was this past week's export sales report. So that was not a reaction to the steel tariff. That was a reaction just to the import restrictions on solar panels. So the steel thing is bigger, and it's not just China. In fact, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, other big major trading partners of ours.
Our NAFTA trading partners.
Yes, exactly. This is a huge deal, and it's not just China, but like I mentioned, we already have seen what can happen. This is not great news for the agriculture sector if something doesn't change, if someone can't convince the administration to pursue a different path.
Is that part of this retaliatory effort, or the possibility of retaliatory efforts? Is that why we saw the wheat market pull back substantially today?
That's a possibility. I think that could be related to any number of things, just speculators closing out positions, or perhaps weather, a forecast for wetter weather in the southern plains. But honestly, it would be justified if wheat did pull back based on export expectations. This old crop market, there's no good reason for U.S. wheat to be rallying or moving higher when there is so much of it here in this country. We could make an argument for putting in risk premium for the new crop wheat market because there is drought. And I hate to be the person who is ringing a bullish bell about wheat in March, at the beginning of March. However, when you look at the broad extent of that drought, it's in American wheat growing regions, absolutely, hard red winter wheat growing regions especially, but also spring wheat growing regions and all the way up into Canada. So all of the North American wheat growing regions are facing some kind of drought right now. And if the weather doesn't change in the next couple of months, yes, there would be some bullish justification in the new crop contracts, but those old crop contracts, yeah, export-wise, there's no reason to get bullish about that.
There's no reason?
Absolutely not, no. Especially not with these pressures you mentioned, just globally, these trade wars that could develop.
Let's talk a little bit more about weather. We're expecting maybe some drought relief over the weekend here in the Western Plains and some of the plain regions up into Canada. Will that be enough relief to provide some more support for the markets?
Yeah, that could be, like I mentioned, a very good reason why we saw some of that washed off here right on Friday. So if that develops, great, and it needs to be over the next couple of months. It needs to be severe relief in those really extreme areas in the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma. So with winter wheat, do you expect winter wheat to pull up spring wheat prices with it? Absolutely. So those, if the majority of the bullishness is for that hard red winter wheat contract, that will affect all of the milling wheat in North America, including Canadian spring wheat, including Durham wheat. If we really had a shortage in production in that in 2018, then yes, the continent would have to start importing milling wheat. So absolutely, these markets will move together.
Elaine, the last thing I wanted to talk about here as we talk about wheat was this issue that they've been having in Canada with railway. They haven't been able to get shipments of their grain, specifically wheat, to the export ports. You were in a conference this week. Can you tell us a little bit about the tension that's going on there and what you see that doing for the markets?
Yeah, I have heard that. So they have struggled this winter from weather reasons, and the U.S. experienced something like that in 2013, 2014, where you get just sort of a plugging up of the supply chain, and it's not great for end users who need to get that, and you can have strange spikes in prices that don't really reflect the underlying supply and demand. But it tends to be a temporary thing that gets washed out pretty quickly.
Okay. Elaine, let's talk corn and soybeans here. When we look at issues affecting these markets, South American weather is still a hot topic. Is there a point of no return, so to speak, when we know, yes or no, we are going to have to fill that void that they can't fill?
I think that this week was really the come to Jesus moment for the soybean market and soybean meal market. I guess I didn't even realize to what extent that had really affected the conditions, particularly of the late planted soybeans in Argentina. But the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange this week said that 76% of their soybean crop and their corn crop is either poor or very poor. So that's huge. I mean, we experienced dry weather in the U.S. and soybeans bounced back because soybeans are a pretty resilient crop. But if that extensive of a proportion of their crop is doing that poorly, then yes, I think that's why we continued to see the soybean meal rally. You know, it's starting to pause, but why we saw that rally continue through this week.
A question I have when we look at domestic soybean production, let's say that Argentina has a big void and we need to fill that meal void. How much more can we increase domestic soybean capacity?
I don't have specific numbers for you, but that's absolutely where we would want to go is exporting our value-added processed products, the soybean meal, absolutely.
And we're still seeing soybean meal be the leader here in the soybean complex?
Well, through most of this week we did. Here on Thursday and Friday, the meal kind of moved lower and soybeans moved higher independently. So I don't know if that is just a function of where the speculators are pulling out short positions or adding on new long positions. That's hard for me to say, but I guess that's where we need to continue to watch, is for the meal to be the leader.
Elaine, when we look at a price point, $11 in the deferred months are still a long ways away, but do you have bullish optimism that will hit near those levels?
I don't know. I mean, if we are at a point in the Argentinian crop that it's either made or not made, and possibly there's not going to be new news. The story may have already played out. So for the new crop, you mentioned $11 for the new crop. We saw insurance prices being set. The February references were set at $10.16, which is pretty good, about 3 cents less than last year. So that's a long ways from $11. And if we've already seen that weather from Argentina, if that's the one ace in the hole that we had, that may have already been played.
Okay. Elaine, let's transition here into corn. We touched a little bit on it, talking weather in South America, but the bulk of Brazil's corn crop, the safrinha corn crop, is in the second corn planting. What are your thoughts about where we're headed with the weather?
Yeah, weather-wise, obviously Brazil is not in as bad of shape as Argentina, and they may continue to be the favored market for people who are going to the global export market looking for places to buy feed grains or to buy soybean meal or to buy soybeans. The U.S. needs to remain competitive with them, absolutely.
Absolutely. Elaine, let's take a Twitter question here. Or I'm sorry, it's a Facebook question, social media here. We have Roger in Kokomo, Indiana, says, will China's increase in ethanol usage have the same paradigm shifting effect on the corn industry that the U.S. boom had?
You know, this is the one big piece of optimism I think the corn market has, and it's tempered a little bit this week, again, by the U.S. administration deciding or not deciding or negotiating what to do about RINs or E15 sold through the year. That will be interesting to see, but it kind of doesn't matter, right? There's not really a blend wall if we can find these export markets to send ethanol to, and not just China, but lots of smaller Asian countries, lots of countries in South America that need to meet their Paris Climate Accord agreements. They're really looking for ethanol to be a way to reduce their carbon, and U.S. ethanol really has an opportunity, and that's maybe the one demand factor that we can see growing in the U.S. corn supply and demand table. Yeah,
that's a little bit bullish news then.
That is. I think the numbers are something like an extra 500 million bushels worth of corn going into the ethanol grind, ultimately being shipped out the door as ethanol.
Okay, Elaine, one final question before we transition to meat. New crop corn hit their resistance mark of $4. Do we see it staying there? Are we going to move ahead a little?
You know, Delaney, I looked at this this past week about how similar the corn market this year has been moving compared to the way it moved last year. Last year, it had a low of about $3.85, you know, somewhere in the beginning of February, and then it hit about $4 right here at about the beginning of March. Did the exact same thing this year. It's been creepy to the degree to which the prices have matched exactly. So if it followed 2017's path, then yes, we would just see things dwindle downward and downward until you had a summer rally and then dwindle downward towards harvest. I don't know that, I think it would be odd to see that do the exact same thing one year after another, but it's certainly a possibility seasonally that you would see corn prices decrease.
Okay. Elaine, let's talk cattle. We had the cattle on feed report come out last Friday. How did we see those numbers reflected in this week's markets?
Well, yeah, this week was not a great week in the cattle futures. They continued lower. The cash trade was okay, and I think it's just, again, I think going forward, this is another market that is going to be extremely sensitive to export problems or the interpretation or the appearance of export problems that will really, you know, make cattle traders nervous, I believe, and pork traders.
Definitely. Any concern over the big placement numbers we saw in that report?
I think, yeah. So particularly going into those summer months, I think we need to start thinking about risk protection for the June contracts for both feeders and lives, because we know there's going to be a large supply. I think it could be another scenario where we repeat 2017, where we have all of these wheat fields that may not be harvested for grain. If that weather scenario doesn't change the next couple of months, we've got another scenario where the cattle will be put onto the wheat fields, and that will just push back that marketing and bringing out of the feedlots or onto the open market.
Okay. Over the last, week and a half, we've seen the April live cattle contract give up quite a bit. It sank to its lowest levels since January. Do you see further downside risk?
I absolutely do. I think that the trend in this market is lower, as you point out, Delaney, and I think there's absolutely that risk of looking at 115 in that April contract. Yeah, I think that's the direction it seems to be heading, and if folks need to get something marketed, here's an opportunity to be putting in risk management.
With some weather that might happen in the plains over the weekend, will that give relief to the cattle markets, or will we see that a further downside risk there?
No, I think if you did see rain come in, that tends to make actual cash buyers a little more willing to go out there and spend money and buy the animals. So I don't see that being a big threat to these prices necessarily in the near term from one week to the next.
Okay. Elaine, let's wrap up our conversation with pork. Last week we saw the third largest weekly export sales in the history of export sales. Where do we go from here?
We better hope that continues. That is extremely important to the pork market. We see, on the cut per cut. It's the lower price cuts that we're starting to shave off some value this past week. The high price cuts, the bacon, the things that Americans are going to buy, our domestic demand is going to be okay. But we need to keep shipping the lower value cuts out. Otherwise, I think you're looking at that June value at $80 is an incredible danger of not seeing the usual seasonal pattern go up. If we're increasing our supply and increasing our production here domestically, but we're not going to be able to ship it out, I think it's entirely dependent on what the international consumer does and feels about U.S. pork to answer that question.
Really quick before I let you go, do you see any possibilities on retaliatory tariffs when we look at hogs or beef?
Absolutely. This is why why I'm beating the dead horse here, is that absolutely. For pork is probably the biggest part of the meat market that is most dependent on these exports. And if that doesn't happen, or if something threatens that, if we antagonize our trading partners, that is a huge threat in a market where we are increasing 2% or 3% per year in our supply. We've got to have some place to push that out the door.
We definitely do. Elaine, let's keep this discussion going in Market Plus. But again, a big thank you for being here today.
It's been a pleasure.
That wraps up the broadcast portion of Market to Market. You can watch more discussions in Market Plus, available in podcast and video form on our website. Before we go, this week marked the passing of Dan Miller, a previous executive producer of Market to Market and former general manager of Iowa Public Television. Market to Market is produced at IPTV Studios. Dan had a deep commitment to both editorial integrity and the purpose of public television. Neither wavered during his 37 years with Iowa Public Television. He will be missed.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content.
Wherever your operation takes you, or who you share it with, we'll be where we've been all along. With you from the word go. Proud sponsor of Market to Market.
Tomorrow. For over 100 years, we've worked to help our customers be ready for tomorrow. Trust in tomorrow. Information is available from a Grinnell Mutual agent today.